In stature, she was very tall. In appearance, most terrifying. In the glance of her eye, most fierce, and her voice was harsh. A great mass of the tawniest hair fell to her hips. Wow. Pretty vivid, right? That's a description from the Roman historian Cassius Dio, and he's talking about one of Rome's most terrifying enemies.
And here she is. This is Boudica, the legendary queen of the Iceni tribe in ancient Britain. For centuries, this is the image we've had of her. Powerful, fierce, almost mythical. But what's the real story? Who is the actual woman behind this epic legend?
Well, that's exactly what we're going to get into. This is a story of rebellion, of brutal revenge, and how a queen who was defeated in battle somehow became this timeless icon. So, let's dive into the incredible story of Boudica, the rebel queen.
Okay, so our story actually starts not with some big epic war, but with something deeply personal. It starts with a betrayal that would end up setting all of Roman Britain on fire.
All right, before we dive any deeper, there's something really important you need to know. Pretty much everything we have on Boudica comes from just two guys, Roman historians named Tacitus and Cassius Dio. So think about that for a second. We're seeing this entire story through the eyes of her enemies. It's literally history written by the victors. Just keep that in the back of your mind as we go through this.
So, let's set the scene. In the area we now call Norfolk, you had the Iceni tribe. They were led by their king, Prasutagus, and his queen, Boudica. Now, they were what's known as a client kingdom. That basically means they were technically independent, but, they were really operating under the thumb of the Roman Empire.
But then, around the year 60 or 61 AD, everything just falls apart. The king, Prasutagus, dies. He actually tried to protect his family. In his will, he left his kingdom jointly to his daughters and to the Roman emperor. A pretty clever move, you'd think. But the Romans, they just ignored it. They moved in, annexed the kingdom, took all the property, and then, according to Tacitus, they did something truly horrific. Boudica was publicly flogged, and her two young daughters were raped. That was the spark.
And you can just imagine their rage, that public humiliation, that unspeakable violence. It ignited one of the most ferocious rebellions the Roman Empire ever faced. The Great Revolt was on.
Boudica rallied the Iceni. Other tribes joined in, and their revenge was absolutely brutal. First, they hit Camulodunum, that's modern-day Colchester, a town filled with Roman army veterans. They wiped it out. Then they marched on Londinium, which was a pretty new but bustling commercial hub. Gone. And finally, Verulamium, which is now St. Albans. Every single one of them was burned to the ground.
You can just see the path of destruction here. It cuts a fiery swath right through the heart of Roman power in Britain. Boudica and her army weren't just fighting. They were literally erasing these symbols of Roman conquest right off the map.
And the human cost? It's just staggering. Roman historians estimate that somewhere around 80,000 people, Romans and their allies, were killed during this uprising. 80,000. And Tacitus makes it really clear. This wasn't a war for territory. This was a war of pure extermination. He said the Britons had zero interest in taking prisoners. It was all about slaughter, meant to strike absolute terror into the hearts of the Romans.
But you don't build an empire the size of Rome's by backing down from a fight. The Roman governor, a guy named Suetonius Paulinus, he turned his legions around to face this rebellion head-on. This was it, Rome's final stand in Britain.
So let's look at the matchup, because on paper it's a total mismatch. You've got the Roman army, about 10,000 highly disciplined professional soldiers. And on the other side, a massive tribal army led by Boudica, maybe 10 times that size or even more. But this battle wasn't going to be won by sheer numbers. It was going to come down to strategy and discipline.
And this is where Roman strategy just totally shines. Suetonius was smart. He chose the perfect spot for the battle. A narrow gorge that basically made the Britons' huge numbers completely useless. The legions just stood their ground, let loose a storm of javelins, and then advanced in that classic unstoppable wedge formation. They just shattered the tribal army.
And just like that, the rebellion was crushed. As for Boudica herself, well, this is where her story ends, though, again, our Roman sources can't quite agree. Tacitus says she took poison so she wouldn't be captured. Cassius Dio says she got sick and died. We don't know for sure, but either way, the rebel queen was gone.
But here's the crazy part. Her death wasn't the end of her story, not even close. In a lot of ways, it was really just the beginning. See, her defeat on the battlefield was what paved the way for her to become this powerful, lasting legend. Yeah, I mean, for more than 1,000 years, Boudica was basically forgotten, just a footnote in some old Roman books. But then came the Renaissance, and scholars started rediscovering all these classical texts, and suddenly her story just explodes back into the public consciousness.
And right away, her image gets co-opted for political reasons. People started depicting her as a Tudor queen. I mean, think about it. It was perfect propaganda for Queen Elizabeth I. England was facing the Spanish Armada, and what better story to rally the people than one about another British queen who defended her island from foreign invaders?
Then, as Britain started building its own empire, Boudica's image changed again. That Tudor look fell away, and she was reimagined as this noble, classical heroine. She became the perfect symbol for how Britain saw itself, with that defiant, unconquerable spirit.
And this right here, this is probably her most famous transformation. It's that iconic statue that stands right by the Houses of Parliament in London. And get this, the project was pushed for by none other than Prince Albert, Queen Victoria's husband. How's that for irony? The woman who nearly burned Roman Britain to the ground, who fought an empire, had now become a symbol of the British Empire.
But the story doesn't end there. In the early 20th century, she was adopted by a whole new cause. The suffragettes, in their fight for the right to vote, looked at Boudica and saw this incredibly powerful woman who stood up against an unjust, male-dominated system. For them, she became the ultimate symbol of female strength and defiance.
So it makes you ask the question, right? Who was the real Boudica? Was she a brutal rebel who oversaw the slaughter of tens of thousands? Was she a patriotic hero fighting for her people, or is she something else entirely? Is she just a mirror, a powerful symbol that every generation is used to reflect its own values, its own hopes and fears?
And maybe that's the real takeaway here. The story of Boudica proves that history isn't just a set of facts about what happened. It's also about the stories we choose to tell ourselves about what happened. A queen who led a failed rebellion nearly 2,000 years ago has become one of the most enduring icons in history, constantly being reshaped to fit whatever a nation needs her to be. And that leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? What does the way we see her today say about who we think we are?